So we're very lucky to be joined by Shelby Talcott. She is a politics reporter for Semafor, and she was there in Iowa. She's actually still in Iowa. And so we're going to talk to her about the political candidates, and also she can evaluate all of the Iowa State Fair food for us as well. Shelby, great to have you.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we're just showing some of the kind of viral moments from the fair. DeSantis being chanted down with "We Want Trump" and the "Ron Be Likeable" banner, and the Vivek Ramaswamy rapping. Talk to us about the overall mood of people who were actually at the fair, and the way that your report specifically talks about the way that Trump was able to exert sort of maximal influence over the fair.
Yeah, what I thought was really interesting is when we're talking to voters on the ground at the fair, they're interested, or they tell us that they're interested in a Trump alternative. So Vivek drew pretty big crowds. Ron DeSantis obviously drew pretty big crowds, plus some left-leaning protesters who were eventually kicked out, which he wears as a badge of honor. But then you have Trump swoop in, and it is like no other presidential candidate exists, right? And so it's something we've seen time and time again, and it was front and center at the fair. He came in for less than 2 hours, I think it ended up being on Saturday, when all of these other major candidates were there. And during that time period, it was like all eyes on him. He drew the biggest crowd. He had pro-Trump voters shouting down Ron DeSantis as DeSantis was grilling at the pork tent. And it's just kind of reminiscent of it represents the broader idea of, sure, we have all these voters who say that they want alternative candidates, but we also have all of these voters who, at the end of the day, also love Trump still.
Right. I mean, Shelby, can you just go into a little bit of that also from the voters that you spoke with, and some of the color from actually being on the ground? I mean, what does the energy difference look like? It's something that I always noticed in 2015 or 2016 when Trump was running, that people were just not picking up on that on a national level.
There's a lot of energy, and campaigns have been telling us constantly, we see that there's an opportunity, particularly in Iowa, to take votes away from Trump. And when you're out on the ground talking to these voters, I'm seeing that also based on what the voters are telling us. And so when candidates are hitting the ground here, they're doing it hard. They're going big. You had Ron DeSantis, who is not known for his retail politics. I think we talked about this last time I was on. Do retail politics pretty much all day at the Iowa State Fair, even going into the agricultural building and manning the egg on a stick tent, which is exactly what it sounds. Is he was putting sticks on eggs and handing them out, which is a very popular attraction at the state fair. You had Vivek Ramaswamy, as you said, rapping. He also hired a Revolutionary War band that started playing songs after he ended his Kim Reynolds event. You had Donald Trump come in and drop $20,000 for fairgoers for food and drinks. So candidates are taking this very seriously, and it's kind of like a go big or go home type situation before the first debate.
I'm pretty shocked by the whole egg on a stick situation. I've heard about many of the Iowa State Fair foods, the fried Oreos and the corn dogs and like typical fair. Isn't there like butter, fried butter, I think is a thing as well? Never heard about the egg on a stick.
Yes.
You have this part in your piece about, I mean, this is just classic Trump, how he makes everything a show. He knows how to one-up everybody in terms of the showmanship. Saagar and I were talking about how everybody else, like all the other candidates, they'll put on their jeans and try to be one of the everyday folks. Trump just shows up as Trump, does his thing. You say he arrived at the event with an entourage of Florida lawmakers, well known to conservative media. As DeSantis flipped burgers, Trump's private plane strategically flew overhead, distracting fairgoers who turned to take photos and videos of the moment. A Trump aide confirmed the campaign was responsible for a smaller plane that flew above the fair throughout the day with a banner reading "Be Likeable Ron." And as you mentioned, he also just dropped 20 grand to help subsidize the fair food for people who were there.
Yeah, I mean, it's classic Trump, right? A big part of Trump's campaign is trolling, quite frankly. And if you talk to his campaign, they will openly admit that part of Saturday was designed to troll Ron DeSantis in every way possible. And we saw that. And it was effective, because what ended up happening, if you read all the headlines, if you search DeSantis, Trump, Iowa State Fair, every headline will read Donald Trump dominates at the Iowa State Fair, or Donald Trump trolls Ron DeSantis. And so it's this really interesting thing. But on the flip side, as you're talking about this piece, they also are taking the Iowa State Fair and Iowa as a state really seriously. They have 30 plus staffers here every single day throughout the entirety of the festivities. They're having Marjorie Taylor Greene is coming next Saturday. They had Carrie Lake here. They had Wesley Hunt. They have a number of surrogates who are going to be on the ground participating in fair activities, talking to press, talking to voters, because this is really an opportunity for both Trump and the other candidates, but particularly Trump, to kind of sway some of these less politically inclined voters to his side.
Shelby, I mean, that's an important point. There's a lot of courting right now of Governor Kim Reynolds, who clearly seems to have some sort of preference for Ron DeSantis, but she has said that she's not going to endorse until later on in the race. How is the Trump dynamic influencing her own decision about endorsements?
Well, I think it's very obvious that is a tense situation right now. If you talk to Reynolds staffers, they will argue that she has no problem with Trump. It is Trump who has a problem with her. And I think to an extent that's accurate. But I also certainly think as Trump continues to do these things and say these things and he keeps going after her, it wears on her. And the result is you've seen her really step up with how many events she's doing, particularly with Ron DeSantis after the Iowa State Fair, which she spent a portion of the day with him. She even did he did the soapbox with her. And then she spent some of the afternoon with him. And then she went to an event with him that evening. And so she seems to, I know she says that she's not going to endorse until later in the race. But I think part of what really frustrates Trump is that her actions are suggesting kind of who she is leaning for right now.
And DeSantis has also made no secret of trying to court her, brings her up in all these interviews and talks about her pro-life record and all those sorts of things. When you talk to the non-Trump candidates and campaigns, what is their theory of the case of how they make the comeback? I mean, the lead seems insurmountable. In fact, if you look at history, no one has been able to overcome this much of a deficit to be able to pull off the nomination. What is their theory of how they might be able to change what looks like an coronation at this point?
That's the thing. There's no solid plan that I've personally heard in terms of, when I talk about a solid plan, I'm thinking step 1, step 2, step 3 equals we beat Donald Trump, right? It's more broad ideas of, well, we're hearing from voters on the ground that they're interested in an alternative. True. So we're going to be out on the ground 24/7 trying to court them. True also. And then the third thing I hear a lot is that eventually, particularly with all of these indictments, voters are just going to end up tiring of Donald Trump. But the problem with that is it all kind of depends on voters actually ultimately coming over to your side. And so I think this is the broad idea behind this whole presidential campaign is there's only so much Trump rivals can actually do. And at some point, I think, in a way, it's up to the voters.
Hope is not a strategy, as they say. Shelby, thank you so much. Great to have you and great to have your insights. We really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Shelby.
Hey, guys, if you like that video, go to breakingpoints.com, become a premium subscriber, and help us build the best independent media organization on the planet.
That's right. We're subscriber funded. We're building something new. We want to replace these failing mainstream media organizations.
So again, to subscribe, it's breakingpoints.com.